Okay, let's get right into this video. So I've been waiting quite a long time for this period of time to show up, and previously it's been setting the stage, it's been bringing people's awareness to this new paradigm shift, going from say 3D to 5D, which is the buzz terms at the moment, or going into a paradigm shift, moving from an old world to a new world, or from the information age to the golden age. Okay, depending on what school of thought you come from will determine how you approach this, but it's all kind of the same thing. At least in my mind it is, and that is that we're moving into a phase of what we would call enlightenment, where we are becoming more aware of the things that human beings are able to do that we've been taught are impossible, or woo-woo, or hocus pocus, or people have been suppressed and murdered for and burned at the stake for, i.e. magic, right? Extrasensory perception, psychic ability, supernatural tendencies. And there's a really big misconception going on, and it's easy to miss. It's elusively obvious when you see it, but like I said, it's elusive, right? Because of the way we've been conditioned to put this in our blind spot, and to dumb ourselves down, and to explain things away, and basically just deny it. Because as the cliche goes, people are easier to control when they're not aware of their innate, natural, supernatural abilities. And so a lot of people in the group, when I say a lot, I mean, it's a lot for me, it means that it's taking up a lot more of my attention now, because typically I've sorted out my life in a way where I have as much free time as possible, and I don't have to work very much or very hard, and now my focus is on my family, and so my values have shifted slightly into more family, less about conquering the world, because it's a bit of a joke, really. Trying to be in control of things like the world is just ridiculous. We can barely control ourselves, let alone another person, let alone an entire nation, country, series of countries, entire human race. So this new paradigm shift is where we're starting to realize that, obviously we're all connected. We hear this all the time, but what does that mean? Like, oh, we're all one, we're all connected, and we're all, let's all be nice to each other and treat each other the way we want to be treated. All those things have merit in them, but I don't think we really understand what it means. Like, how does it translate back to me? Like, how does it make my life better, other than avoiding conflict, right? Or not getting the attention of the quote-unquote adult bully, who can escalate all the way to, going to war with another nation. So we're starting to understand now, with technology advancing so fast, with the emergence of artificial intelligence, is just how interconnected at least the cyber part of our network is, and how that connects with the physical world, and just how much influence that can have on our physical being, our physical experience. And so, when we look back at, let's say, religious models of thought, frames of thought, operating systems of the mind, there was nothing around at the time like a computer or an internet or a network or satellites or text messaging or social media or video FaceTime, nothing like that was available. So how do you explain to people who've never seen an iPhone before, don't even understand what the internet is or what it's like to live with an internet, and how do you explain to them this interconnectedness that we all are? Now, just to give a bit more oomph to this frame, I once heard or read, I can't remember now, it was such a long time ago, and it was about people who were designing things like new technologies, robotics, things like that, and they were looking to mimic living organisms, living structures, and there's a word for it. I was going to say systems, but well, yeah, it could be living systems basically. So in order to advance robotics and machine learning basically, and someone said that everything we have in terms of technology is an extension of what we are already capable of, but perhaps it's at a subconscious suppressed level that we can't access it, or we don't want to access it through because of traumas, social consciousness level traumas, like perhaps a different history that has been swept under the rug. People talk about the mud flood and things like that, and that's an interesting idea. But the concept is in support of what I'm talking about. It's more to the point of, you go to Egypt, or you don't even have to go to Egypt, and you see these pyramids, and there's no real explanation of how they were built or what they actually did. And there's this, narrative going on that they were tombs for pharaohs, but you check your energy and you go, that doesn't really sound right. Doesn't quite make sense. It's a little off somewhere. I don't know why, I don't know how, but doesn't ring true to me at all. Doesn't that narrative sounds like it's either someone covering up something that they don't want us to know about, because it will point to a whole bunch of other stuff that people don't want people to know about, or it's just that they have no idea and that was the best thing that they could come up with under the circumstances. So we have this sort of thing happening throughout history, leading up until now, where we have all these stories of how it's always been, how it is, how life is, and it maybe it was tested in the beginning and they got some supportive evidence towards it, but I don't think it would have been conclusive all the way. And probably, now it's not financially viable or beneficial to go back and test those theories anymore. So they get left unchecked, and we continue along living our lives as though those assumptions are fact and truth, and perhaps they're not, right? So now we're moving into this phase where we're starting to look at robotics and technology and machinery and vehicles and artificial intelligence and programming and codes and networks and stuff like that. And we're going, how do we make this more user-friendly? How do we make it easier? How do we make it more intuitive? How do we make it smarter? How do we make it think like us, right? And we're starting to realize just how complicated it is to mimic what humans do naturally. And one of the things that we're seeing physically represented in terms of this video coming through on your device right now, probably on your phone or desktop or iPad, right? Something that you can pretty much carry around with you, unless it's a desktop, and probably fits into your pocket and has more more memory and storage space than the computers did to go to the moon. If you believe or don't believe in that, it's up to you. But follow me along with the story. Let's not get off on too many tangents, because it's so easy to get into these tangents now with this multi-dimensional reality that's unfolding. Each moment in time is a jump-off point to another branch and branches and platforms and networks of more branches and timelines, and you can end up like this pattern here, moving through into all these different aspects of the same facet, the same entity. So all these things are representations of what happens, at least at a subconscious level, maybe not instantaneously, of ways we as human beings can think, perceive, imagine reality. And so now that this is sort of catching up to us, and we're questioning, well, what's the usefulness of humans if AIs are faster than faster than the fastest human, smarter than the smartest human by far, because of this collective consciousness that is, the internet, the World Wide Web, the collective subconscious of the human race, being able to access it all simultaneously, instantaneously, and make connections that, our conscious human brains don't have the capacity to perceive. Make decisions on that, and affect the future of all of us in real time. So this comes back to, we come back full circles of what I started with at the start of this video about extrasensory perception, psychic ability. And perhaps it's not this magical thing, although it's magical, right? If you think about how amazing it is, it's in the realm of magic. But maybe it's not this mystical magic trick, like pull a rabbit out of your hat type of thing. Maybe it's when we look into it, it's this incredibly intelligent, loving design and designer, this mind that is beyond what we can imagine right now. And we hope that it's loving, right? And so what we're doing now is we're connecting to this, and we're connecting to this in not just a religious experience, or maybe a spiritual one where we access a state of bliss, an emotion that is just beautiful and lovely, and ones that maybe you want to reside in forever, but ways that we start to connect and perceive deeper aspects of reality, more bandwidth, in the spectrum of information, and be able to join these dots and make synthesis out of all these seemingly random bits of information that are going in all these different directions, and somehow harness them and dovetail them and nest them, and be able to possibly rearrange them or perceive them in a way we hadn't perceived them before, and do something with it and let it unfold and have an effect on our present and future and past. Time in essence. So things like, and the way we can check this, and just because I know some people are like, well, I've had all these experiences growing up, and I used to have intuitions about things, and then maybe they would manifest, and or my parents had alternative beliefs, and they were very closely influenced by folklore or mythology, and so we're like, okay, well, how does this all land, And one of the things I've noticed when you talk to someone who is very left brain, let's say, or otherwise, their mind is very rigid in this third dimensional sequential model of past, present, future, cause and effect. And you can only move one direction through time in your consciousness. Is that anything inside the mind is, just information. It's not real. And anything external outside of you is real. And if you want to have an effect on that, you have to go and change things outside of you in order to have an effect. The new model, the fifth dimensional model, is that everything is happening inside you. And when all those different facets of you align and they make up a mind or a filter, when your consciousness and energy moves through that filter, it extrapolates and unfolds and extrudes into your reality. And that's what becomes your reality. Or, in other words, in the quantum model, everything in what we think is reality is this fluxing energy of positive, negative, and not at the same time. It's mere potential reality. It's a mere potential reality possibilities. And then when you have an idea, an intuition, an imaginative thought, a desire, a fantasy, a fear, let's go back to desire and fantasy, not fear. When you think and hold that thought and observe this quantum soup of fluxing quantum energy that's both positive, negative, and not, that when you hold that image in your mind, you actually send out a signal into the space around you, if there is such a thing, and that interacts with the quantum particles, and that decides whether those particles collapse into a positive, negative, on or off state. And the combination of those, millions and billions and trillions of atoms, electrons, particles, whatever, and that makes up the physical reality. Now, it's a pretty radical thought, is that, reality doesn't exist until you think about it. But I guess it's like, how do you know? How do you know that you haven't been doing this automatically on autopilot since before you can remember, or since before you became aware that you were doing it? And then out of the blue, over time, you just got caught up and took it for granted. And then instead of going within yourself and deciding what you were going to think and feel and take action towards and collapse into your reality, you got into this automatic feedback loop where you were reacting to the things that you were creating without realizing it. Okay, so I know that's a lot, and some people are like, yep, I get it, what now? And other people are like, whoa, I lost you way back at hello. Right? So if you're somewhere in between, that's good. So way to check this is that when you close your eyes, as an example, and you shut down the external stimuli, the easiest one is to close your eyes. Harder one is to shut your auditory down, but maybe with noise cancellation, earpods or headphones or earmuffs, that's another way of doing it. But basically people go into, meditation, they fold their legs away, they put their body into a relaxed state, they shut down. Sometimes they put on blinders or an eye mask. Perhaps they'll put on something to shut the exterior sound out, and they go inward. And when they're inward, they can start to have inner experiences. They can start to hear things, or it's like, when that song pops into your head and it's on repeat. You don't need an iPod, iPhone. You can hear the sound, the music playing in your mind. Or when you close your eyes and you can have a daydream or a waking dream. Or, you see this I saw this today when I was at the grocery store. This person's walking towards me down the aisle while we were both shopping, and she was having a good little conversation with someone that wasn't there, right? And it was probably something that was an event that happened that day or a week ago or in the past, and they were reliving that scene in a way that perhaps they wanted to benefit from more, recreating it in a new way, which is rewiring the experience in the mind. Or maybe they were rehearsing for a future meeting with someone. And you see this all the time, especially you see this with the homeless people ranting down the street. They're arguing with probably their the person that traumatized them, right? And they're lashing out at anybody that resembles that image, right? So you're holding this frame, this map of reality inside your mind, which is almost identical to the experience externally, to the point where your imagination your body's not aware. Well, it's aware, but it's not very discerning, let's say, that the experience you're having inside your mind is not real, not a physical one, and it's not happening in the moment. Your body still reacts to it. And if you want to test this, then let's not think of an experience where you were where you got worked up, but it's very it's very easy to think about someone that you're attracted to, and thinking about having a good experience with that person. And if you can get yourself into that imaginative state, it's not long before your body starts to rise to the occasion, okay? Or move in ways that invite more pleasure into your body. And so a more simple way of put it, probably a bit more PG-13, is that, think of your favorite meal, when you're hungry. Definitely your body's going to start reacting to that image that you're holding in your mind. And if anyone has a craving, or worst case, we have addictive tendencies, if you have a thought, whether you consciously think about it or not, about a certain thing, people, place, time, event, object, that if you can't stop thinking about it, your body will produce reactions and sensations that will get you up off your chair and down the street hunting for whatever it is that that you're craving for. Okay, so typically, we use this ability just for everyday life, doing our job, interacting with our family, friends, hobbies, basic stuff. And it's likened to when computers, coming out in the, pre-internet to the public, let's say. So let's say about the 80s to the 90s, you could do a lot on the computer, and you could even save and transfer information from one to another through devices like discs and CDs and things like that. But pretty much it was all standalone, right? And you could upgrade the parts and you could get new programs, but whatever you did on that computer was, air gapped, isolated pretty much to some degree to every other computer out there. But now, we have the internet, World Wide Web, we have social media and YouTube and all those sorts of things. And everything is connected all the time, and information is being transferred and sent and received by choice or not, just to keep everything going. There's information being transferred all the time. And so now what we're seeing is people are having these intuitions, right? They're having sensations in their body, and they're having connections, interactions, communications with other people in other places or times about certain events or things or objects, and they're going, well, what's happening to me, because it doesn't fit into the old operating system of the third dimensional standalone thing. It's like, imagine you've got a computer in the 80s, and there's no modem, there's no plug connected in, and all of a sudden it starts interacting with the environment, and it starts giving you information about people, places, times, events, future, before it happens. An example of this was an old movie called Electric Dreams that came out in the 80s, and it was, of course it was done in a dystopian fashion towards the end of how things could get out of control. But I mean, that didn't, well, I guess it did happen in certain instances, but for the majority, generally speaking, none of that sort of stuff happens to people. So, but the thing is, this was a computer that was, at first he started programming and it was doing cool things like making music and illustrations, and it could talk and interact with him. And then he ended up getting a modem, and then it started connecting online, and he could do, little things like book his airline ticket, which was like, whoa, you can do that without picking up the phone or going physically to a desk and speaking to a person. And you could pay for it with a credit card instead of cash. All that sort of stuff, which today is just like commonplace. And in the, something happened, something magical happened. He ended up accidentally spilling champagne on the keyboard, and then that caused a short circuit, and then the computer became self-aware and started acting like a juvenile towards him and trying to get attention and things like that. But what we're finding now is that, when we look deeper into this awareness, it is super intelligent. It is so far beyond our personal idea of what intelligence is that we can't even measure or understand what it's doing, right? Or why, or what it's trying to achieve. And so what happens is we get all these intuitions, we got all this information. It's like this thing is trying to give us clues. It's trying to give us, not just give us information and teach us, but it's trying to upgrade us so it can give us more information to get faster understanding. Okay, so it's like going from Windows 95 to, Windows, whatever the latest version is, or, if you're a Mac user, it's the latest OS, with all the upgraded system. And so when we make this transition, when we become aware that this transition is happening, we're like, oh, but if I upgrade, like everybody goes through an update or an upgrade, what if I can't access my files? What if my keychain doesn't remember my passwords? And, what if I lose stuff? What if I can't find it? What if the way I interact with it changes, and it's trying to get me to interact with it in a more efficient way, and I'm not understanding how to do that yet. I'm still on the old operating system mindset. How am I going to get my day-to-day stuff done? And you get this sort of anxiety, stress, because you're trying to do things you're doing things in a way that are more efficient, but you're not efficient at doing it yet, because the way you used to approach things is on autopilot, even though the autopilot was cumbersome and obsolete and wasn't cutting the mustard and really wasn't getting the results you want. You switch over to this new operating system. Now you have to do everything manually, actively, consciously for a while, and at least until you get used to how to turn these things on automatically and engage the autopilot, and you understand how it all works. An example of this is, I just recently bought a Tesla 3 Performance, and with full self-driving capability, and got all the upgrades before I bought the car. And I got into the car and I'm like, okay, I'm driving it, and it's beautiful to drive. It's fast. It's really accelerates, instantly. It's very responsive, but it doesn't feel like any car I've ever driven before, right? It's everything is, computer assisted, right? Even the steering, you can set how it feels. So you can, have these 3 basic settings, but it still steers the same, but to you it feels different, which is an interesting idea. And same with, the acceleration and the pedals. You can adjust all that, and you can adjust the seating, which we could do in every other car. But then you turn on autopilot and the car starts to drive itself in a lot of situations, right? And so here you are, the car's driving itself. It knows what it's doing because it's programmed. It knows what it can and can't do, but you don't know what it's capable of. So even though you're not driving the car, you're still on edge watching the car drive itself and making sure you don't have to jump in and catch the wheel before it crashes, right? Which it's not going to do, hopefully, right? So here we are moving into this new way of being, because it's like, in the metaphor of the self-driving car, it's like, well, now I can do long trips. I don't have to be so consciously active. I'm not going to get as tired. I can be in the car longer. And it's more enjoyable, and I use up less mental energy because the car's taking all the mundane driving off me. And once I understand how the limits of the autopilot, then I just have to come in when I see that the car is coming to the limit of its current learning, right? Because these cars are all learning all the time. All the information of how to drive on streets from every car all over the world is getting synthesized in a network in the dojo, and once the new update comes, it all gets beamed back down through Starlink satellites, let's say, for example, into the car, and the car becomes smarter and starts to drive even more efficiently, and leaving you less to do, freed up to do other things, right? And so this is the concept we're moving into, of moving from a 3D to a 5D, from a baseline normal human being to a supernatural, outside the bell curve way of being human, right? And what does that give you access to? What can you do differently? What else? What can you do more efficiently? What do you not need as much energy for anymore, that you can now get done on autopilot, that before you had to be very active with? So just a practical example, if you're doing a self-driving car and a long trip, now you can spend a lot more time traveling and doing, extending your reach, for example, if it's in business, or you can pursue your hobbies outside of your current geographical territory, because now you don't have to spend as much energy and focus and mental power getting yourself to and from those places, the car will take you. It's like getting an Uber, only you're not getting an Uber, right? So this is the kind of idea that I'm talking about when it comes to moving into a fifth dimensional consciousness. You're still doing all the things that you still are capable of doing all the things that you're doing now. You're going to be doing them with a more efficient operating system that requires less energy and effort and attention from you, which will free you up to put your energy and attention into things that are more interesting to you now, that have probably always have been more interesting, that you just never been able to do them because you were tied up in all these processes, manual processes. Now all those things either happen automatically or they've been superseded by a new application, a new program that does everything much better than the old one. And now you're free to pursue more of the spectrum of possibility that before maybe you had dreamed about, you would if you could, if only it was possible for you. Or perhaps it was just you didn't have the bandwidth and the energy and the focus to be able to even bring it into your consciousness to be able to pursue before. Now you can, right? And so what we're moving towards also is, this phone, this device, this little pad here behind me. These are tools, these are prosthetics. These are prosthetics to help us understand what, at a very subtle subconscious level that perhaps we're not even paying attention to, that is happening all the time. These processes and programs that are running in the background. If we see the screen here, and it looks like nothing's going on, but underneath this, there's a computer that's making sure that keeps going, right? And managing the power and the heat and There's all this stuff going on. You're now getting access to all these deeper levels of your being, and also there's new tools and applications, let's say, for example, to be able to access and make adjustments to these things, right? Or upgrades, or just like with the example of the Tesla car here, is that you don't physically upgrade the car anymore. The car comes with all the upgrades innate, built in. The software packages come. You can upgrade the software packages over time, and the car will access more and more of its innate ability, right? For example, as this is just popping out of my imagination, but if you follow Tesla and SpaceX and Starlink, and then you know about the Boring Company, and you'll know that this is there to alleviate, congestion in typical freeways, especially in Los Angeles. Now, these boring tunnels, the cars or the vehicles, there might not even be cars going through there, or as well as cars, will be able to go through these tunnels at over 200 kilometers per hour because of the self-driving and the self-driving software, the artificial intelligence software, and also the frame of the physical space that it's in is supportive of this much faster travel. So there'll be things that we'll be able to do with these vehicles on these new tunnels, for example, that presently aren't a possibility yet, but will be in time. And when they're ready, the software updates will come through, upload into the vehicle, and the vehicle will not need any physical updating because it will just adjust based on its new programming. That's kind of like what's happening with us. We have all these innate abilities built in, but because of maybe either awareness or suppression and conditioning, that's a whole nother thing, but more likely that the time and the environment is not supportive yet of these new embodiment of these abilities that are starting to emerge now. When all this starts to land, we will start to get more accurate reflections and feedback of what the potential for humans operating as a collective is in these new environments that are created in support of what's already innate inside us. Okay. So in one of the books that the cast of The Matrix, or at least Keanu Reeves, was rumored to have read, was Simulation Simulacra. There was another book that I can't remember the title, and Out of Control. And Out of Control talks about systems, natural systems. And one of the examples was bees. Bees with a hive mind, when they swarm, we're not actually sure how it begins. Is it one bee telling the rest of the bees to start to swarm? Is it a signal that collectively emerges, like a mastermind or a higher mind that emerges out of the connectivity of the bees and sends a signal to the bees to swarm? They're not quite sure, but what they do know is that when bees do swarm, they do amazing things that move outside the limitations of a singular bee, right? So it's a bit like another example. If you see starlings in the sky flocking together and they move, and they don't all merge into a shape of a big bird. They move, and they move with the environment, and they actually show you maybe what the wind current looks like. And they move in ways that are just, beautiful and unpredictable and mesmerizing all at the same time. And so one of the questions is, when humans reach a state of consciousness where we can access this collective consciousness and interact with it and choose willingly of our own volition, hopefully, or be enrolled and immersed into this mastermind for short periods of time at least, what is it capable of? What is it? What are its desires? What is it trying to do? Beyond survival. And how does it begin, and how does it end, and why? All these questions come up. And so what we're starting to experience, based on the feedback that I've gotten from the group here and people in the group who have been with me for a while and practicing these different little techniques to get them into a state of preparation, be able to access these states, is they're starting to, get into these supernatural states of being. They're starting to access information that they're not even sure how they did it, or why it's coming to them, or what it means, right? And so they get this answer to a question that they don't know how to ask yet, or they get they what's the saying? They get an experience first, and then they're having to decipher what the lesson is of that experience after it happens, right? And decode it, basically, unpack it. And so it's kind of like we are the forerunners of this becoming normal and I wasn't going to say predictable, but normal and frequent and common, right? One of the things that I'm convinced of is that when you access these states, the current of energy, the bandwidth is so large that the body can only, and the consciousness can only handle it for very short periods of time before, it burns the system out, right? And this is why we in conversations I've had with people who are, really deep into this, is that we sense that this is a loving intelligence, because it's kind of like as soon as you start to get to a point where it's too much, before you even say anything or think about it or yell out your safe word, it backs off, right? And it takes you back down, and it allows you time to rest and recover and reorganize and calibrate, and when that's all done, and adjust and get a bit of practice with the new feeling and the new state, and reflect on the experience before it gives you some more, right? And so one thing I'm convinced of is that all these little tiny experiences we're having, and we're having them as a collective now, all of us, to varying degrees and frequencies and capacities, is that it's all getting us prepared to interact with this higher frequency, this higher vibration, this larger current, for longer periods of time, more often, for new experiences and new outcomes that none of us have ever experienced or seen, or even maybe knew they were possible, or they were even on the spectrum of possibility and potentiality. So it's an exciting time, and this is happening like whether we like it or not. It's been building up to this for a long time, and it seems like it's a natural cycle, like this is meant to be happening at this point in time now. And the only real resistance here is our capacity to be able to hold that long, for longer periods of time, and to allow ourselves to, change and adjust with it, right? So it's kind of like a spiritual fitness. We're all being trained to get fitter now. It's like we're all in the gym. And some of us, are on a once a week schedule, some of us on an everyday schedule, some of us are on all the time schedule, it just depends. And we're all doing it to the best of our ability, to the edge of our capacity as often as we can, right? And so this is all having a compounding effect on the level of acceptance that's coming through, because it's like when you're all, it's like back at, my gym at jiu-jitsu, is that you all start off at wherever you begin, and you're training to get better and better and better, and as you get better and better, everybody else gets better and better, and you're not feeling like you're getting anywhere. It's only until a new person comes into the gym, or someone from another school comes and visits you and trains with you, that has a whole different point of view, that you actually see and get a good reflection, right? And so here we are getting all these new experiences and not much reflection in terms of where we are in the spectrum of things. And so this is why for a long time I've been putting out information to get people prepared to be able to at least look at this and decide if they want to consciously get on board and participate, or if they just want to be dragged and swept along and do it unconsciously, which is fine. It's not my preference. I don't like those kind of surprises, happening, all the time. And they're not always pleasant surprises, because perhaps you're not prepared for it. It's like not training at all and then getting thrust in. It's like the schedule goes, bing, all right, today you have to do a marathon and you have to get through it. Well, you probably get through it, but it would have been a lot better if you trained along the way and got prepared and then did the marathon. You might actually enjoy yourself. You might actually find you're really good at it. You might actually find it's something you want to do more and more. And you can do it really fast, and maybe there's rewards for you doing it really well. And so this is how I like to look at this new phase that we're all going through. And it's almost like you look at it like a game and you gamify it, right? You say, okay, this is happening. It's happening whether we like it or not. It's happening for our benefit. It's happening for our collective human race and planet, solar system, universe benefit. And if I don't do it consciously, and I get dragged along, I'm going to be pushed around and feel like I'm out of control all the time, until I finally surrender, through struggling, kicking and screaming maybe, or I can participate, I can consciously focus on this, and I can learn it, and I can bring my conscious mind along with me and allow it to learn from this higher mind, these new experiences. And I can become an acting participant in all this. And, like with a game, like gamifying anything, there's rewards along the way. There's upgrades, there's ability trees to fill, there's challenges to rise to, there's, as the metaphor goes, there's bosses to beat. There's new maps. It's however you want to look at it, it can actually be quite fun and enjoyable. So, having said all that, I realize being called out to sort of, I'm getting my information, my downloads, my dreams, my telepathic messages to start to teach what I know. And not in a way of a guru, but just as like, hey, I'm on the path too. I'm a willing student, and I consider myself an A-grade student, right, in this, at least in my attitude and my approach, if not in my results. And whoever wants to learn this stuff, and if you're still watching this, well, I would say that's you, because we're nearly an hour into this, and this is the most obscure thing to talk about, and it's not entertaining unless you're interested in it. So you would have checked out already if you were in the old mind. Is that if you want to learn this and participate in it, then I'm more than happy to shoot the shit with you and to swap programs and, and practice this, What I do ask in return is that as you start to get results, as your life begins to change and you become more empowered and confident in whatever your skill, ability, or awards you receive, you throw a little bit back towards me, or you help me in my pursuits as well. Okay, I think it's only fair, since I'm not charging like, a spiritual teacher would. This is more of an underground approach, and I think, there's a lot more benefits than just getting paid in, money from somebody. When you start gleaning and sharing, it's kind of like going to a farmer's market. It's like, I got a surplus of apples, you got a surplus of peaches, mate, let's do a trade. It's no skin off my nose to give you a few more apples, no skin off your nose to give me a few peaches. And at the end of the day, we all walk away with more than what we, more variety than what we had, right? And if you get 2 or 3 or 4 or a group of people doing that, then it's not long before you got everything that you want, and you're not really stressing to get it, right? So this video has been a long time coming. I've been waiting a long time for people to be at a stage where they can, first of all, hear this, second of all, have some understanding of it because they've got some experience in this field now, and more to the point, that they realize the value of learning this stuff and the tools, getting good on the tools, and what are the tools and how do you use them and why, to what end, and what is possible with them, Just to give you a little metaphor here, these aren't hammers and chisels and saws. These are, more delicate tools, right? They're for different things, right? They're more subtle. And just because they're subtle and not obvious and, not power tools, that everyone is conditioned to want, doesn't mean you can't get a lot done if you know how to apply them. And so, just to finish off, I'll leave you with this little story, which I love this story, and I'll probably mess it up because, you told it in 10 different ways. Basically, the story goes is that there's this huge battleship. It's like an aircraft carrier sitting on the dock, waiting to go out and do maneuvers in the ocean. And, thing's fully loaded. It's got thousands of sailors on there, and pilots and cooks and welders and engineers and cleaners, and you name it, they're all on there. But something's wrong with this fucking ship, and it's can't leave, right? So everybody's there, and the admiral's stressing out because every hour that thing's sitting there not doing what it's supposed to do is, you've got to pay everybody, and there's only a certain amount in the budget, and you don't want to waste it all on a ship that's just sitting there doing nothing. And so they call in this expert, right? And this guy is, he's not your conventional expert, right? He doesn't advertise, can't find him in the phone book, hasn't got any credentials that people would expect, but somehow he's an expert. So they hear through the grapevine, this is the guy that you want to help you get out of the dock and out into sea safely, and so you can start navigating this amazing ocean of infinite possibility. And so they bring him in, and they're all like on edge, like, come on, let's get on with it. And for the first couple of hours, he just sort of walks around the ship and goes to the mess and gets a cup of coffee and walks around, sips his cup, talks to a few people, then he'll move to another part of the ship and then sip his coffee some more, look around, have a conversation with a few more people. It's all very casual, and everyone's like, what's going on, man? Like, we've got to get out of here. And then, has another conversation, goes to another deck, and then eventually ends up in engineering and speaks to the engineers there and sipping his coffee again, and goes to another cup of coffee because he's drunk the first cup, and everyone's like, come on, man, like, just do what you need to do. And so he goes, all right. So he pulls out his little bag, pulls out a little hammer. It's probably not even as big as this one. And he looks up and he goes, tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. He goes, all right, that should do it. Start her up, let's go. And they're all like, okay. Yeah, all right, well, okay, start it up. So they send all the signals, start the thing, and then the engine starts. And like, holy shit, it worked. Like, fuck, what'd you do? It's like, don't worry about it. Wasting enough time. Why don't you just get on and get out to sea? And here's my invoice. And it's like for $1,000. I'm like, man, you're here for not even 4 hours. Most of the time you're sitting around drinking coffee, you're talking to people, you're not even doing any work. And then finally, when we press you to do something, you pull out this little hammer, do a few taps, and okay, it all works, but for $1,000, really? He's like, well, that's my fee, that's the value of what I bring. And so the captain of the ship goes, I'll throw this guy a curveball, see how he reacts. to a bit of, a bit of shtick. And he says, well, can you give me an itemized bill? He goes, yeah, no, sure, no problem, easy. So give me the bill. He goes back on his computer and spits it back out, and he goes, here you go, itemized bill. Says, hit with hammer, $25. Call out fee, $25. Knowing where to hit, $950. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching, thanks for your attention, and bye for now. I'll see you all in the next video.